This is A New Angle, conversations about how we're doing and where we're going. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by the Headwaters Foundation, First Security Bank, and the University of Montana College of Business. Hey folks, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. Today is our first edition of The Ripple Effect, a quarterly series in which I speak with grantees of the Headwaters Foundation. Our guest today is Alice Boyer, Executive Director of Forward Montana, a nonprofit organization dedicated to building political power for young people. Alice has held a variety of leadership positions in her young career, all focused on getting more people engaged in our democracy. Alice, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So tell us, where did you grow up and what did your parents do?
I grew up here in Missoula, actually. I'm a full-on local. I was born in St. Pat's before they shut down the baby area for the first time, or maybe, first time that I remember.
Yeah.
And then actually spent the first couple of years of my life in Dixon, Montana, and moved down to Missoula with my family at like 2-3 years old when my mom went to the University of Montana Law School.
And are you a tribal member as well?
I am, yeah. So my mom is Little Shell and Blackfeet, and I'm an enrolled member of the Little Shell tribe. And then my dad was Métis from Canada, which is a whole other sort of like designation in and of itself in Canada, which is really cool.
Sure. And what did they do?
So
Or do they do, I suppose?
Yeah. My mom is a public defense attorney.
Okay.
She's been a public defense attorney most of my life. Like I said, we moved down here for her to go to law school. And I think that experiencing and seeing her do that work, which for folks listening, there may be people who know how hard that work is already.
Sure.
But public defense attorneys, especially, they're like a really important job guaranteed in our Constitution, U.S. Constitution. They are very overworked. They work with a lot of folks who are let down by the systems that we have in this country. And I think that has really impacted the way that I have seen the world through the eyes and work that my mom has done.
Yeah.
And then my dad, he was a high school English teacher for a long time. First, he was working as a high school English teacher in Ronan when I was little. And then once we moved down here, he worked at Big Sky High School for a long time before going back to school, actually, to be do a grad program in media arts here at the university.
Okay.
He passed away my junior year of high school, and one thing that I really value that he brought into my life, especially growing up, was sort of this connection to cultural identity. My mom, while she is also Little Shell and Blackfeet, Native identity is so rich and complex, especially with American history. But my dad, he was always deeply connected to sort of the cultural side of things. He danced men's traditional. I remember being an elementary school student, and he would come in and show his outfit to my classroom all the time growing up. And I think really just instilled that sort of pride in where I come from culturally.
Yeah. So you come to the University of Montana, you study philosophy. Why did you choose philosophy?
Funny enough, my mom actually also studied philosophy here at the University of Montana. We had a same professor, Professor Albert Borgman, who taught here for a long time.
Oh my gosh, what a lovely human being.
Yeah, and I got to take a class of his while I was here in my undergrad, which was really cool, just sort of in some of the last years that he was teaching here.
Yes.
And although I did not purposefully go into philosophy because my mother had a graduate degree in that, or an undergrad degree in that as well, I think that, again, sort of growing up with a parent who was also interested in philosophy, she's always been this person who just likes to ask questions and sort of dig into nuance. That is something I very much grew up with, and I think just really informed this interest in me, or grew this interest in me for wanting to dig into the why and how do things fit together? How does just any little piece sort of fit into the grander picture? And to me, philosophy is a way of thinking more than anything. I'm not the person you want to come to ask which philosopher said this, or what age did this philosopher live? But the thing that I gained most from that philosophy degree was the ability to really critically think.
Yeah.
And just think that it's so important.
And so at what point did political engagement become important to you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think that is more and more. I see a lot of young people who are kind of like, why would it not be interesting?
Yeah.
There's this question of like, how could I, and I feel this very deeply, is like, how could I not be interested in like these systems that impact everything we do? Whether you have a grocery store within like walking distance from you, or even just like bus distance, or, public transit. All of these different pieces are things that impact our everyday life that are impacted by policy. And from a very young age, my father, he suffered from a borderline personality disorder. And I think growing up with a parent who has such a unique, tough mental health challenge really creates sort of this perspective from you of like really wanting to sort of help people, wanting to care for folks as well. And so from a very young age, I knew that I wanted to do something that could impact other people in a really positive way. And for me growing up, and especially once I sort of got into college, it became clear to me that politics and policy was sort of the way to hopefully push for like the most positive impact for the most people possible.
Sure.
And so that's really what kind of got me into the world post college.
Yeah, and sort of describe your series of experiences that have led you to this point. We'll get to Forward Montana in a moment, but you've worked in a variety of organizations trying to make better policy, trying to get people more engaged. Talk about those experiences.
Yeah, graduating from college, I actually went out to Iowa to work in the Iowa as a field organizer in the Iowa caucuses, which anyone, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, recognizes that the Iowa caucuses are a big deal.
Yeah.
It's really what kicks off, any sort of presidential election year for a long time.
Yeah, for better and worse, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. And so it was a really exciting opportunity for me to go out and experience what that energy was like. I got my start as a field organizer out there. And then after the race I was on, we dropped out of the race. I ended up coming back to Montana and working on the Native Vote program in 2020, which was also just a crazy year, as many might expect, to be working on a program like that. Of course.
Outreach looks different under COVID.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. One of the cool things that we got to do with that program, though, is think through what a sort of digital virtual powwow could look like. A lot of the outreach, also for better or worse, that candidates do is to go to Indian country during powwow season.
Yeah.
And so since that was deeply impacted by COVID, we had to get really creative about how we were reaching folks, and determined one of the ways that we could do that was to play with this idea of hosting a virtual powwow. And it was really cool to try and figure out what that looked like.
Yeah.
After coming back, or after the 2020 election, I went out to Seattle and I worked for a private diversity, equity, and inclusion company where I learned a lot of really great skills and how to navigate tough conversations. And then came back to Montana. It's my home state. I really love being here and know that this is where I want to be in the long run. And had the opportunity to start to engage more in the civic education and participation side of things, which is where I really started to dig into things like voting rights, our learning more about our state constitution and how great it is, how many additional rights it sort of gives us as opposed to our U.S. Constitution, and started to really dig into how can I support civic education, civic engagement here in the state.
So you're now at Forward Montana. You've been there since June of 2025. Tell us about the organization. What are you all about? Why do you exist?
Yeah. Forward Montana is a youth-led and run civic engagement and education organization. We've been around since 2004, when we initially actually started here on the University of Montana campus as a group of students who was concerned about what was happening at the Board of Regents. And decided that it was important that student voices were heard in some decisions that were happening at that point. And so since then, we've grown a ton. We're now a statewide organization. We have offices here in Missoula, in Bozeman, and in Billings. as well as staff spread out from Butte to Helena to Glendive, which is really cool. And then we also have folks up in the Flathead. We really focus on working to make sure that the young people of Montana, which we define as honestly 14 to 35, so a really large group.
I've aged out, bummer.
Yeah. We work to make sure that young people in Montana have the tools, the skills, the information they need in order to deeply engage with their community and in civic life sort of broadly. We do that through a variety of different ways, but especially through voter engagement and education. So making sure that people know how to register to vote when changes are happening to the way that you need to cast your ballot, like the newly updated signature requirement on your ballot now. We also do that through making sure people know when their municipal elections are happening or their school board elections are happening, what your county commissioners do, for example. And then another piece of the work that we do is leadership development, which we find is really important. We do that through a variety of different ways as well, including our community organizing fellowships and internships. We also do that through our staffing, honestly, just ensuring that our staff is really supported to professionally develop. And we also do that through our board, which is really cool. There's a lot of nonprofits that can sometimes struggle to find board members. It's hard to find people who want to commit their time to being board members.
Yep.
And we take really seriously the fact that Forward Montana gets to be an organization that helps develop young people to have these skills to engage, no matter where they end up, impactfully in the world around them.
So outside of the information gap that you mentioned a few moments ago, like what are barriers to entry for young people? Like why are young people, to the extent young people are not engaging, what are some typical reasons why they are not?
I would say that it is because of the systems around us.
Okay.
I think that it is not surprising to many people that many of our systems and institutional setups have been created in a way that makes it difficult for folks from many different backgrounds, many different demographics to engage fully. That could look like young people. That could look like Native folks and reservation communities. That could look like the working class. It's hard to show up to a city council meeting at 5:30, 6 p.m. on a Monday or Tuesday when you've been working all day, you're exhausted.
Yeah, those sorts of meetings don't often provide childcare and other services
Exactly.
too, right? Yeah.
And so I would say that one of the biggest barriers that we're tackling is just the systems and the sort of institutional setups that we have. And that has really contributed. I think when you talk to many young people, including myself, you would hear that many of us have not really experienced a time where our government systems or institutions, we can say confidently, have improved our lives. I think there's a lot of nuance to that. We're also living in a time that, like American citizens, for example, we benefit from so much compared to the rest of human history, right? And young people nowadays, especially here in Montana, we're really experiencing the difficulty of having rising costs of homes. We also are seeing that it's difficult to find well-paying jobs to be able to allow us to stay in Montana. Many people are leaving the state to try to find work, to try to find places that they can live more comfortably. And so I think that there is also this level of, it's not a surprise to anyone, it's not new information, but this level of apathy that is really difficult to feel like, well, why should I engage in these systems that haven't actually shown that they'll help me?
Yeah, you sort of describe a combination of structural barriers and then a sentiment, like a cynicism, like why bother?
And because
what's in it for me?
Exactly, and not because young people don't care. I think that is like the piece that folks get messed up on sometimes.
Okay, draw that out for us.
Yeah, young people, and I'm also talking for myself here as a young person. We do care. We care about all the same things that everyone else does, right? We care to make sure that our friends and our family and our communities are safe, are cared for, are connecting, are healthy, all of these different things. But the way that the structures have and the institutions have kind of failed us or felt like they've failed us has contributed to this apathy. And so you can care all you want, but if you're not seeing the way that that care can be turned into action and actually change the systems, it's really difficult to feel like, well, why should I put my trust and engagement into these larger
Sure.
systems versus maybe going inwards and becoming more, closed off.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a question. You might want to pass on it, but I
Okay.
just want to give you this chance.
Yeah.
So you mentioned institutions failing young people. Can you get specific on that? Like, what's an example of an institution failing you or failing people that you care about in your age cohort?
I think that when I say that institutions are failing young people, a big aspect of that is that our institutions and our systems don't even really take the first step in trying to engage young people in decision-making processes.
Okay.
That is a big piece of what Forward Montana does, is wanting to prepare young people to be able to engage in processes. So in Bozeman, for example, one of the things we got to do just last year, the Bozeman City Commission was putting out this survey of folks in the community to learn more about the needs for housing.
Mm-hmm.
They put out this survey. A majority of the respondents that they got back ended up being homeowners, which of course is like going to really skew the data that you're
Yes.
going to gather from
Yes.
that. One of the things we got to do then as Forward Montana was come into that process being involved, knowing it was happening, and say, hey, we can actually help make sure that older homeowners are not the only people whose voice is going to be reflected in this.
Yeah, you need a
information.
representative, or you need a sample that's representative of the population.
Absolutely. So we were able to then support the city commission in sort of extending that timeline, continuing to get that survey out to people through our like tabling, our direct engagement, door knocking, all sorts of stuff. Ended up being able to support bringing in more representative sample sizes with young folks who
Yep.
are often renters. And that is the type of example of these systems and institutions don't even always take like the first step and just pausing and sort of recognizing like, okay, we have this information, we've gotten some input. Who is this input from?
Right.
Is it actually demonstrating a reliable sort of snapshot of the community as a whole, or are we really only taking information from the group of people that our systems have been set up to support getting that information from?
Sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I mean in like a broad sense of these systems aren't working for young people, in that they aren't even really taking that first step of listening.
Yeah, and it's hard to discern if that's an error of commission or an error of omission by the organizers of the survey or whatever the case may be. But either way, important voices are being left out. And
Yeah.
if you're left out over and over and over again, you can see how that would sort of create this disconnect of why
Yeah.
bother if they're not interested in helping me out or helping my cohort out. I could see it being easy to tune out.
And I think too that one of the things about this and why I put so much emphasis on like institutions and systems is because I don't blame for a second the folks who are working at Bozeman City government,
Sure.
right? Like we are all steeped in the culture, in the institutions, in the ways that we do things. We've been steeped in it since we're born.
Yeah.
And so I think that that is a really important distinction as well.
So talk about some other efforts that Forward Montana is engaged in to break this system up and to get people excited and engaged and active.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest things that we do is ensuring that young people have even the information of what is happening to lower those barriers. So you would be maybe surprised, maybe not actually, at how many times we are reaching out to folks to let them know that a school board election is happening.
Right.
You know, an 18-year-old maybe who is either still in high school or just leaving, give them the information that, hey, your school board election is happening right now. Like you can have an impact in that.
That's one to pay attention to as a young person too.
Yeah, and especially in these races that are so, people talk about this all the time. Like in Montana, these races are decided by a small number of votes often, especially when you're talking about school board or your municipal elections. And so it's also where your vote can have such a strong impact. Some of the other work we have done in the past and continue to do is really ensuring that our rights on like voter rights in Montana
Yeah.
are not being infringed on. We do a lot of education, like I said, around when new legislation is passed and impacts the process for voting. Last legislative session, a rule was passed that you need to include your birth year on your return envelope for your ballot if you're voting via mail. And there was a number of ballots that were rejected this last year because that is information when those big changes that happen, a lot of people don't pay attention to, they're not informed of. It's difficult to just remember when you've been doing something for 10 years.
Yeah, they're on autopilot.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
that you have to do something different. And so those are a lot of the pieces that we do. Another piece that we're actively engaged in right now is gathering signatures for Montanans for Nonpartisan Courts ballot initiative.
Yeah.
That feels incredibly important because at Forward Montana, we recognize how, like I mentioned earlier, incredible really our state constitution is. Many states don't get the benefit of having a state constitution that gives you additional rights, like our right to privacy, that is very strong here in Montana. And we feel that it is really important to not only be able to uplift what our state constitution, the awesome like additional rights it gives us, but also communicating with young folks then the importance of having a state judiciary that is going to uphold that constitution. The constitution doesn't mean anything if you don't have people to actually enforce those rights, right?
Yeah.
So we are really excited about that effort right now too.
So in the last couple of years, I think the general sentiment on social media has shifted in some important ways. I think we're understanding more about some of the effects on our mental health, the effects on our degree of polarization in the discourse. However, as somebody who sort of, I assume, grew up in a smartphone-enabled world, immersed in social media, or at least native to that information economy, how do you think about the role of social media in our current political moment, but also as a tool for solving some of the problems and challenges that you're working on?
Social media is such a complicated topic.
Yeah.
I have this sort of like my own theory around the close friends tool that you can use on Instagram and how it has actually really blossomed some friendships of mine in real life. Just this act of being able to put someone on your close friend story and sort of create that initial sense of like vulnerability and like wanting to connect. So I think there's like really interesting aspects of social media for that reason. It's also really clear that you have so much access to so much information. You can learn so much using the internet. Social media as well is a really great way to spread information and news as it's happening. I do think though, of course, there are plenty of challenges to the widespread use of social media. And in fact, we are also seeing this really interesting, not new trend where folks are sort of, this is the nostalgia aspect of reverting back to things like email newsletters or zines. You may have heard of more of that like physical aspect of
like a magazine.
Yeah, like a magazine,
yeah, like an actual
version.
thing, a paper thing that you read.
Yeah. I actually just talked to someone today who said they were considering subscribing to a newspaper, and I was like, wow, that's
amazing,
crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of newspapers that would like to hear that news.
Yeah, truly. And so I think that in terms of the work that we do, one of the challenges that social media brings is, of course, this like polarization, which is not, again, a new concept. Many people have talked about this. The algorithms really determine how much you are seeing, what kind of information you're seeing, what kind of perspectives are sort of being fed back to you, and further ingraining your biases or your understanding of different pieces. And I think that one of the challenges for us is to be able to make sure that our information is getting out in front of people, is, overwhelming that algorithm a little bit.
Yeah.
But one of the ways that we've been thinking about trying to also utilize social media and sort of move folks from this online engagement and like posting an infographic to your story, which is great because information is great, but there is this really real need to also move that online engagement into the real world.
Yes.
And so we are currently exploring what it could look like to have a digital engagement organizer on board on our staff to have real conversations with people. Sometimes we get DMs asking why we're talking about an issue in a specific way, and how cool would it be for us to be able to have someone who can set up a one-on-one with that person, maybe via Zoom, maybe via the phone, to have a deeper, engaging conversation about whatever question they have, that it's really difficult to have that conversation online.
Yes.
And then be able to move that conversation from not just your Instagram DMs, but then into a phone conversation or a video conversation, and hopefully find ways to move those people even further into engagement in real life as well.
That's the thing, right? If we're just scrolling through national political information that's been presented to us by the algorithm, I think people often think of that as engagement, like I'm following political stories, but I'm not actually doing anything in the real world to reflect what I care about in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And so I think that idea of how do we transition people from that high engagement online to engagement in the actual world, it's a really noble pursuit.
Yeah.
Have you learned anything about successful ways to make those conversions?
One of the things we've been experimenting a lot with is just offering community spaces for people.
Yeah.
Another thing you hear from young folks related to social media is how these algorithms have really pushed us into these niches. We talk a lot about at Forward Montana and amongst our staff sort of about how, again, these structures and these institutions have been designed in a way to really pull us apart from one another.
Yeah,
when
there's
in
a profit
reality,
motive to that polarization.
Absolutely. You have so much more in common with truly most people you find in the world than you do not. And one of the things we hear from young folks all the time is that there are no longer third spaces for people to gather in. It feels really disconnecting to be spending most of your time online, seeing all of these like lovely lives that people are living, and then look at your own life and maybe feel like, well, I don't have a community. I don't have a place where I get to go and like express myself. And so we have been, for now, I think a year or two, hosting these events called Stitch and Bitches.
Okay.
Which have been really cool. They have started off as a space that is truly just about inviting people to come together, work on some kind of craft that they have going on, and then spend that time talking kind of really about whatever they want. But what's been interesting is that we've had these events going on, and kind of organically we've seen that young people start to go, okay, this is like great and we really enjoy this community space, but also like, okay, tell us about the work you guys are doing.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, like an incredible feeling when you're an organizer, of not having to feel like you are pushing the conversation, but having people be able to connect with one another. And I think that that organically then builds an urge to want to engage and like do things that benefit your community.
Yeah. Excellent.
So moving people from, seeing an ad on Instagram or seeing a post on Instagram into just a community space has really been an effective way to sort of bring people together and get them offline.
Let's talk about your partnership with the Headwaters Foundation. You're a grantee of the organization. How have they empowered some of your work?
Talking about my philosophy background, like we were earlier, I think something I really appreciate about Headwaters is the way that they are approaching health outcomes and trying to improve health of communities in a really holistic way. So Forward Montana, we have worked on health policy stuff in the past at different points, but we are not, we're not
you're not a public health organization.
We're not a public health organization. But Headwaters is really looking at how everything fits together to contribute more positively to positive health outcomes. So their support has meant a lot. Ensuring that young people, again, have the skills, tools, information they need in order to participate in the community around them is, of course, going to lead to people being able to more deeply engage in the policy and the structures and the processes that actually impact policy that happens in the healthcare world.
So, Alice, you described a variety of, initiatives and things you're working on. If you were to sort of fast forward 10 years, what does winning look like to you? How do you conceive of that? Is there a way you can envision a world where you put yourself out of business, and what does that world look like?
I think, frankly, as a young person, right now, it is very difficult to imagine a world where suddenly overnight we don't need organizations that are advocating for more representation by young
Certainly.
people.
Yeah.
So I want to start there. But if I could snap my fingers and imagine a way that we could get there, I think that, well, one of the ways that we would see and identify success is that there are less barriers to young people getting engaged in the world around us. So that might look like city council meetings are at a different time, or like you mentioned earlier, young parents, maybe there's childcare available or
Sure.
food available or something that allows people to come there after a long day of work and be able to actually actively engage. There's other things like automatic voter registration, for example. If you want to talk about policy, one of the big pieces of work we do is voter registration.
Mm-hmm.
And so something like automatic voter registration would take away a big piece of that. There are also things, I think, like leadership development that would be, it's a really unique sort of space because leadership development means so many different things to so many different people. But I think finding ways to deeper engage that part of the work in public schools, for example,
Yeah.
fully funding our public schools so they can do a lot more. They can offer more sort of development in that way, I think would be pieces that could help move us towards a future where Forward Montana doesn't have to exist.
Yeah.
Those are some of the things that come to mind.
And so if people want to help, what do you need? How can people help?
The way that people can help is by reaching out to us. We have, of course, our social media profiles. We also have our website where you can actually go to get involved, and one of our organizers will reach out, sit down, have a one-on-one with you, talk about what you care about and what your self-interest is. I think something that we sometimes miss in these conversations, and especially I think in more progressive spaces, is we can kind of get into this mindset of like, if you have self-interest or you admit that self-interest, it's almost like a no-no. It's like you want to do it for the greater good kind of thing. But it's also, I think, okay to acknowledge that, for example, I am a young person. I have a vested interest in making sure that young people are listened to, are heard, are seen as leaders, are seen as competent, as knowledgeable, all of these different things, because we do care. There are plenty of young people I know who are so thoughtful, so intentional, so engaging. And I think that one of the things our organizers do a really great job at is helping people to understand what their self-interest is so that we can tie them into opportunities, skills building that will help them to actually impact the civic world around them, the world around them, in order to address whatever that self-interest is as well, and end up helping others at the same time.
Very good. Alice, when was the last time you changed your mind?
The last time I changed my mind, I think I might get a little meta with this.
Please. As a good philosophy major would do.
Exactly. Thank you for acknowledging that. I thought a lot about this, and I think one of the things that I think is really, really important is to recognize the humanity in other folks, no matter the differences that you see. And so one of the things I try to do consistently is when I meet someone or am engaging with someone who we may be on the total opposite ends of almost everything you could possibly conceive. And it's really easy to fall into this mindset of like, oh, this person's horrible. This person's evil. This person's maybe not even
to
a
dehumanize
person.
them, right?
To dehumanize them. And I'm always trying to challenge that in my brain to instead say like, okay, well, what is that same piece of humanity that I can see in that person? And so in that way, I think I'm always trying to change my mind sort of about how my impression of other people. And I think that's difficult, but I also think it's like one of the most important things we can do, because otherwise we very quickly turn into the exact thing that we're trying to fight. If you can't acknowledge that maybe there is a piece of myself that could be this person that I deeply disagree with, and I think you set yourself up to fall into logical thinking traps, into being manipulated, into all of these different things that can really tear you away from what you actually want to do and put out into the world.
Yeah, that's a beautiful sentiment, Alice, and I hope you can maintain it in the work that you do. Thank you for coming in and visiting with us today. Congrats on all your Congrats on all the success you're having in this young career, and I hope all the best for you. I hope all the best for Ford, Montana, and the young people that you're trying to help. Thanks, Alice.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to A New Angle. If you like what we do and want to support us directly, please consider a subscription at anewanglepodcast.com. A New Angle is recorded at Studio 49, a generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. Our presenting sponsor is the Headwaters Foundation, working side by side with Western Montanans to improve the health of our communities. We are also supported by First Security Bank and the University of Montana College of Business, with additional help from CED, Drum Coffee, and Montana Public Radio. Keely Larson is our producer. Libby Riddle is our production assistant. And finally, John Brownell, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.